Welcome to PFF Fantasy Football. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and tonight we're going to talk about all things that just happened from Week 12 Sunday. I have watched every single game that's happened from the day, whether live or on NFL Game Pass. Condensed version, gotta love it. Efficiency, everybody, don't leave home without it. Want to go through some of the top notes from the day, focusing more on matchups, actionable fantasy football takeaways, look ahead, check out some of the injuries. I got some cool PFF Lilly stats for each matchup and just kind of focus on, just interesting findings from this or that, and also just beyond the box score notes, better ball touchdowns, drops, plays that could have been made that maybe were nullified by a penalty, things along those lines that maybe didn't pick up if you weren't able to watch all the games. So thank you as always for tuning in, and let's get after it, everybody. This was a fun day of football, in my humble opinion. First game, Browns defeated the Jaguars 27-25. So don't let one just horrendously awful just a miss by Baker Mayfield overshadow what was, in my opinion, his second best game of the season. I mean, it was mocked on Twitter ruthlessly. Baker Mayfield stepped back to pass. Rashard Higgins ran a slant. There was a miscommunication. No one ever guarded him. Baker stared at him the entire time, and he just sailed it over his head. Kareem Hunt was open as well. I mean, it was a complete disaster for Baker Mayfield on that play. Otherwise, I thought Mayfield looked pretty damn great out there. I mean, it was, one rope after another to Jarvis Landry. We saw Kadero Hodge have a couple nice plays. It was mostly Landry. I mean, 8 catches, 143 yards, and a score. Don't forget, these last 3 weeks with the Cleveland Browns offense, I mean, they have just not had a chance to do anything through the air, more or less, because they've just had one windy, rainy afternoon in Cleveland after another. So going to sunshiny, Jacksonville, Florida, we did see Baker Mayfield and company have a lot more success through the air. Now, I know what you're saying. Ian, they played the freaking Jaguars. They won by 2. Quit, going too crazy over Baker Mayfield. I get it. The Browns are 8-3. Baker has not been a big reason for that. I'm just saying, this was his second best game of the year. Don't be that guy that, takes an entire game away from one pass that was, again, horrendous. Cannot overstate how bad that one pass was enough. Just realized Baker had quite a few much better passes throughout the afternoon. Mike Glennon for Jacksonville, someone that I've been, really just going to town with on Twitter in terms of just making one draft meme after another, but went out there and actually played a pretty darn good game. Had a chance for a bigger performance. Hit Keelan Cole, in a position to catch it 40 yards downfield into the end zone, but couldn't come down with it. A couple defenders around, but either way, we saw an aggressiveness I think was lacking during some of his previous NFL stops. Ended up throwing a 46-yard touchdown to Colin Johnson. That was a dime. Another touchdown to Tyler Eifert. He did miss a few throws down the seam. He wasn't perfect. Again, we're talking about Mike Glennon here, but it was a good game by him. And look, we can say that these quarterbacks that aren't going to be top 10 quarterbacks probably forever can have a good week or two. We don't need to, compare everyone to your Patrick Mahomeses and to your Russell Wilsons of the world. We got 32 teams to talk about every single week. It's okay to stick up for them when they have a good game. Doesn't mean we need to change our, overall career-long opinion. So credit to Glennon and especially Baker Mayfield on some pretty solid performances. They at least, overcame some of the expectations for him. My only issue with the Jacksonville Jaguars in this game was that Laviska Shenault wasn't more involved. Only had 4 targets, 1 rush attempt, was making dudes miss as usual, but I was hoping that, just another guy under center, no DJ Chark, no Chris Conley, maybe they can get, their exciting rookie a few more looks. Just wasn't meant to be. We'll keep an eye on that moving forward. James Robinson ended up being the star of the show per usual for the Jaguars. 97% snap rate, 22 carries for 128 yards, and a touchdown that almost tied it. I mean, he got some help from the O-lineman, but he was dragging dudes into the end zone from about 8 yards out or so, and then they weren't able to get the 2-point conversion. The Browns were able to pick up a first down when it mattered. So this really was a close game, but James RB1 son continues to dominate backfield usage. Things in Cleveland grew a little bit between Chubb and Hunt. We actually saw Hunt lead the way in snaps over the past few weeks, even with Chubb back in action. That changed in this one. Chubb 61% snaps, Kareem Hunt 42%. Chubb had 19 carries for 144 yards and a score. Hunt was efficient too. I mean, 62 carries in his own right. Chubb ended up being the one getting the receptions, mostly of the screen variety. Look, Kareem Hunt is still their 2-minute, primary pass down back, but they're not afraid to give Chubb a screen or two, just because why not? Get your freaking big, talented beast in the open field. That's exactly what Nick Chubb is. And look, it wasn't the greatest performance from Kareem Hunt. I get it. Might be a situation where we're a little bit overzealous calling them both consistent RB1s, and I just mean that in terms of top 12 in our weekly rankings. Kareem Hunt, it's going to be hard to rank 15 running backs ahead of him during any given week, so at worst, he's going to be an upside RB2 because we look at this Browns schedule from here on out, everybody. They're 8-3 right now. Wouldn't be shocked if they could even finish 12-4, if not, 13-3. I know it's crazy, I know, but, after this week, we got Tennessee, Baltimore, the Giants, the Jets, and they end with Pittsburgh. So depending on who could be resting starters, starters, who could have guys out because of COVID. I mean, Browns have a chance to end this season on a nice little run. Credit to them for, really having a nice post-hype bounce-back season compared to, what we were expecting from them in 2019. Some quick beyond-the-box score notes. Harrison Bryant dropped a touchdown. That could have helped Baker Mayfield's day, and then Nick Chubb scored on the next play. Higgins, had that better ball touchdown. Again, couldn't stress enough how bad Baker missed him. Keelan Cole had the potential drop 40-yard score, and Eifert had a better ball touchdown down the seam that Glennon just sailed. PFF Lilly matchup stat. For those that don't know, PFF Lilly is my adorable 25-pound wiener dog. I like to give one just kind of general takeaway stat of maybe something that piqued my interest watching the film and went back over and checked out the stats afterwards, and that is Baker Mayfield. Look, his best game of the year was against the Bengals in Week 7. He had 297 passing yards and 5 scores. Otherwise, this game was his best. 86.8 PFF passing grade. That was the second highest of the year. 258 yards for the second highest mark. 8.6 yards per attempt, his highest mark against a non-Bengals defense. I get it. We're talking about the Bengals and Jaguars. This has not been a good season for Baker Mayfield, but we can give the guy props for one nice positive performance amidst a lot of trash throughout the year. Is he going to be a fancy viable quarterback moving forward? Heck no. I mean, he had to barely get to 29 pass attempts in this one, and it took a Jaguars defense to bring, this high-end efficiency out of him. Just realized this performance, and again, in a sea of disappointing ones, was solid for Baker Mayfield in this passing game. Next matchup I want to talk about was the Bills defeating the Chargers 27-17. This was a game where both offenses were really able to move the ball throughout. We just didn't see, too much importance placed on taking care of the ball. Obviously, that's kind of, life with Josh Allen under center. We did get, both some of the good and bad of the Josh Allen experience. I mean, look, I'm just happy he was healthy out there because at one point, twisted uncomfortably down the ground. I thought we might be losing our guy, Josh Allen, but came back in, even ran for a touchdown afterwards, spin the ball right in a defender's face. So he's fine, both mentally and physically. Good to go there. Had a goal line touchdown to Dawson Knox, who's been back in action. And so, he had an interception, lost a fumble. Again, Josh Allen experience was far from, one of his early season world-beating performances, but we saw the same kind of stuff that makes him tick, week to week. I mean, setting up the first touchdown with just a bomb to Stephon Diggs in double coverage. Was it a great idea? Probably not, but Josh Allen was willing to make that throw. They picked up a long defensive pass interference because of it. I think just the reason he didn't have a huge fantasy game was more or less because he only threw the ball 24 times. So when you see Stephon Diggs only having, 7 catches of 39 yards, credit Gabriel Davis, having 3 catches, 79 yards in the score. But, only Stephon Diggs had more than 5 targets on this Bills team. That was just a factor of them being able to run the ball against this pretty soft Chargers front 7 and the Bills being able to play with a lead for most of the game. So wouldn't worry too much about, guys like Cole Beasley not having as many targets as usual. As long as John Brown remains out, we're going to see, targets condensed around Diggs and Beasley, and to a lesser extent Gabriel Davis more than ever. Quickly, though, if you had Davis and Beasley, that didn't really, you weren't too disappointed because Beasley caught a swing pass that did not go forward. He then threw it into the end zone to an open Gabriel Davis for a touchdown. So you got that little perk from those two guys. On the other side of the ball, Justin Herbert, 52 pass attempts, 316 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Had a nice score to Keenan Allen from inside the 10-yard line. Just a laser right where it needed to be. Bad interception to Tre'Davious White where he didn't diagnose his zone coverage. I'm going to do a study this week on, quarterbacks that have been performing best and worst versus man and zone. Sometimes tough to get super clean numbers on that stuff, but I do wonder, how often rookie quarterbacks do have more trouble or at least more turnover prone against some of these more tricky zone defenses. So more to come on that later, but it was just a lot of dunk downs from Justin Herbert. Hey, our returning hero, Austin Ekeler, 16 targets in this one. Also had Hunter Henry getting 10, Keenan Allen 10, and again, none of these were really downfield. Nobody other than Tyron Johnson had a catch over 15 yards for the Chargers in this one. So this is one of the top 5 offenses in terms of just total screens thrown this year coming into this game. So, the fact they weren't throwing downfield as often wasn't exactly too out of the norm, but it's disappointing. We know Herbert can throw that freaking thing anywhere. I thought it was, an up and down coaching performance really throughout the game from Anthony Lynn, and by up and down, mostly down, because this just was a matchup where with Joey Bosa dominating, throughout the game on the defensive line, just really them having opportunities against the Bills, we just didn't really see enough in terms of, trying to put your foot on the throat, go give Justin Herbert some more chances to win the game. So, hey, in fantasy land, this was Justin Herbert going for over 300 yards. Again, he's gone for over 300 yards and or scored 3 total touchdowns in every game this season. We'll live with it. He completed back-to-back Hail Marys towards towards the end of the game on like their last drive. It was like 4th and 14. Guy catches it. Penalty. 4th and 24. Another chuck down towards the end zone. Guy catches it. Unfortunately, they couldn't go get that cover for the betting faithful, and they got stopped inside the 10-yard line upon completing the second Hail Mary to get it around the goal line. So disappointing ending from the Chargers, but again, Justin Herbert's going to remain a top 5 or top 6 to top 8 fantasy QB moving forward based on what he's shown us all throughout this young season for him. Bills backfield, Zach Moss led the way with 60% snaps, 9 carries, 2 targets. Singletary wasn't too far behind at 40% though, and he actually had more carries with 11 and more targets as well with 3. Both guys were efficient. Singletary did lose a fumble at one point, but they went right back to him afterwards, so I don't think it's really a changing of the guard or anything like that. And yeah, this is the case in Buffalo, and unfortunately with Josh Allen, as he proved today, being more than willing to take off for the end zone himself near the goal line and just not being all that willing to consistently target his running backs, he's just not the most fantasy-friendly quarterback to have involvement with his backfield. Austin Ekeler returned to 73% snaps, 14 carries, 14 targets. 16 targets. We talked about this on the podcast last week a couple weeks ago with the Christian McCaffrey coming back story from NFL Network's Ian Rapoport. Look, a lot of great, breaking news from him, but, sometimes we get these Sunday morning stories like, how Austin Ekeler reportedly wasn't going to be treated as a bell cow back. Just don't let one Sunday morning report change, everything you've heard and kind of formed throughout the week. Hey, it's new information. We got to decipher that. But why would the Chargers bring Austin Ekeler off IR if he wasn't ready, particularly in a game where Kalen Ballage wasn't even active because he was banged up as well? I mean, if you really thought that they were just going to go with Joshua Kelly and Troymaine Pope and keeping Ekeler on the bench after they had already acted him off the IR, I don't know what to tell you. But regardless, we now know that moving forward, Ekeler is fully healthy and is going to have his usual workhorse role. Cannot stress enough how fantasy friendly these 16 targets are. He caught 11 of them for 85 yards. He looked great out there. I mean, he nearly had a 10-yard score after catching it, having 3 guys in his way, somehow spun around him, reached the ball across the pylon, it seemed like, but they didn't review it. Next play, Joshua Kelly jumped on over the goal line. So could have been even bigger, but with this sort of receiving floor, Austin Ekeler is going to be a legit top 3, top 4 PPR running back on a weekly basis here moving forward. Beyond the box score notes, I think I touched on these already. The Ekeler near touchdown, back-to-back Hail Marys, and just Joey Bosa having an overall awesome game. So that takes us to our PFF Lilly matchup stat. So Justin Herbert this year is averaging 23.4 fantasy points per game. That's the second highest mark among any rookie QB ever, trailing only 2017 Deshaun Watson, who's at 24.1. So 2011 Cam Newton was at 23.1, just off Herbert. 2012 RG3 not too far behind at 21.2. No other rookie in NFL history to play even 3 games averaged over 20 fantasy points per game during their initial season. Absolute tremendous performances week in and week out from Justin Herbert. And when he isn't that tremendous in real life, he's been just fine in Fantasyland, which at the end of the day is all we care about when we're trying to rack up these fantasy titles. Next matchup, we had the Patriots defeat the Cardinals 20-17. When your starting quarterback is seen mouthing to their offensive coordinator after the game that, I believe Cam said to Josh McDaniels he's sorry and just disappointed. You kind of know things didn't go exactly the way you want them to. But hey, a win is a win is a win. The Patriots were able to get one in a season that's just been filled with these, crucial last-second moments. So, yeah, Cam Newton, just pretty horrendous throwing the ball. And by pretty horrendous, I mean absolutely horrendous. 9 for 18, 84 yards, pair of interceptions. Look, he got him down there when it counted, but even then, 9 carries, 46 yards. When he picked up this big 3rd and 11 going out of bounds, they gave him an extra 15 yards of unnecessary roughness when he got hit while he was still in bounds. So, Cam's been one of those guys over the years where I feel like he's never gotten the same sort of respect with those sort of unnecessary roughness penalties on the sideline, compared to someone like Brady or just any quarterback that didn't, help revolutionize the position in terms of what they're able to do athletically and with their legs. So I'm not saying, it's a black or white thing or anything like that. It's just a matter of Cam being so big and strong that when he gets hit late, he's not bouncing, to the ground like some of these other fragile guys that are out there. So Cam, it's a situation where, hey, this was a bad call, but I think you look back at across his career and he probably does deserve, some positive aggression at some point with those types of calls. So no, this was not a good game through the air. And because of that, Jacoby Myers, 5 catches, 52 yards. But other than that, man, no one else had even over 35 yards. James White, someone that I was really, hoping hoping to have a big game. Ended up getting there with the 2 rushing touchdowns from inside the 10-yard line, but who am I kidding? That wasn't the reason I was, touting him as a solid DraftKings play over the past week. He only had 1 target in this one. So we've seen this in Patriots games. I was surprised they were able to play with a lead in this one, but when they do, it's going to be tough to expect anything out of this passing game. So just like Damien Harris, is a game script dependent running back, and we're only really looking for situations where they can play with the lead, and even then it's risky. That's kind of how we need to look at Cam Newton and everyone involved with this passing game as well. Kyler Murray, didn't get much going as a runner for the second straight week. 5 carries, 31 yards, no scores on the ground. Perfectly fine numbers for any normal quarterback, but as we've seen with Kyler Murray, the rushing, upside he's shown this year has been absolutely astronomical so far. So I haven't seen that his past 2 weeks. I wouldn't worry too much just yet, but it is worth noting that so much of his rushing yardage comes on pure scramble. So teams start, finding out a way how to defend him a little bit differently. I'm not saying they have. I'm just saying, it would make sense that, a quarterback scrambling rushing yards to be a little bit more volatile than, say, someone like Lamar Jackson, who, while they do get a lot of it scrambling, they are going to continue to get most of their rushing yardage on design runs. Look, Kyler is fine. He's still going to have one of the highest rushing floors in the league regardless. I'm just saying that could be the difference between him literally setting records for the most, rushing yards and touchdowns at the quarterback position versus him just being, top 2, top 3 in the 2020 season. But yeah, only 170 yards, 34 pass attempts. Could have had a bigger day. I mean, Christian Kirk dropped an 8-yard touchdown. Keyshawn Johnson was down just short in his only reception. DeAndre Hopkins dealing with Stephon Gilmore only had 5 catches, 55 yards. So was a performance that, we could have seen, I think, if they ran it over again a couple times. Kyler, has a better day. Kenyon Drake had 2 goal line touchdowns. Again, we've seen those go to Kyler Murray all year long. Just wasn't quite his day from a fantasy land perspective. Looking at these backfields, yeah, Kenyon Drake starting to get more and more back into that old role he had a previous energy. And to Drake's credit, he only averaged 3.5 yards per carry in this one, but I just thought in terms of how he was looking with the ball, breaking tackles, it's almost like he's gotten a little bit better post-ankle injury. He's at least been running better the last few weeks. I mean, it doesn't make much sense, but neither has Kenyon Drake's overall 2020. 22 carries, only 6 for Chase Edmonds. Edmonds, he still had 6 carries and 5 targets, but he's a distant flex play, people. I'm still getting a bunch of start-sit questions with Chase Edmonds in it every Sunday morning pretty much. Kenyon Drake is the RB1 in Arizona. It's going to be, a lower end RB2 in Fantasyland. Chase Edmonds, he's a low ceiling, I think RB4 at best, as long as Drake remains sidelined. Don't cut him. He remains, arguably the highest upside, RB in fantasy, I'd say, other than Latavius Murray. But, as long as Kenyon Drake is active, it's hard to go back to the well with Chase Edmonds with any level of confidence. With the Patriots, so Sony Michel was active in this one, only played 2% of the offensive snaps and did not receive a touch. So Damien Harris, 65% snaps, 14 carries, no targets. James White, 37%, and mentioned those 2 rushing touchdowns, had 5 carries and 1 target. So James White, we certainly can't expect him to be getting these goal line scores in future weeks. It's going to be Cam or Damien more times than not, but at least we have a 2 RB backfield in New England. For years it's been 3, 4, who knows, maybe there's even a game of 5 or something. So it's still going to be a lower ceiling than in another offense just because Cam Newton's so prone to getting these rushing touchdowns on his own, and we're not seeing, the same sort of target floor for James White as we did in past years, with Tom Brady under center. But we continue to see these James White splits with and without Rex Burkhead at a minimum, even if this game, again, it didn't, the thesis behind the play, as some might like to say, would be that we were hoping for the targets, and I know that didn't come to fruition, but just realizing that there are now only 2 running backs to kind of split this usage up instead of 3 or 4, we can get more lucky with touches or fancy friendly touches going our way just because there's fewer backs overall to mess things up. Other notes from this matchup. So, yeah, wild sequence before the half. So, Cardinals have the ball at the 8-yard line with about, 20 seconds left. They throw it to Christian Kirk. He drops an 8-yard touchdown. And then go to Keyshawn Johnson, who is initially ruled to be in the end zone. They call it back and say he's down at the 1-inch line. And then Kenyon Drake gets stuffed right as they go into halftime. So, no points. And again, Kyler definitely gave them more than enough chances to get there. And there was also a touchdown nullified by Gunnar Olszewski. I always mess up his name. Apologies. The Patriots, just special team punt returner. He had a nice punt return touchdown. I just saw the most egregious blindside block ever. This guy was coming. It was not even a blindside block. He clearly saw him. And then this guy gets laid out and then he pops up celebrating like that's something to be proud of. Look, as someone that has been blindside blocked, many times in my life, like when you get blindside blocked, you start having your head on a swivel. That's our freaking expression for it, because once you get hit like that, you don't run around as aggressively. When you don't have the fear of a blindside block, block. If anything, as we were kind of seeing out there, the defenders can run with like a more of a full head of steam and try to cause bigger collisions because they have no fear of an offensive lineman coming out and get them. So I understand why the league outlawed them, because they certainly lead the kind of the biggest highlight-worthy blocks in the game. But I just think that when you look at it, it's really not encouraging as much of offensive firepower as I think they probably would hope the rule does, because I think more than anything, the blindside block rule, it just kind of prevents defenders from having to think twice about running just as fast as possible towards a spot, because you no longer have to worry about the peripheral vision and guys coming out of nowhere. So that's just my little rant on it. I've never enjoyed that rule. It is what it is. Don't believe there are many or any key injuries in this one. Again, this is all stuff that I just noticed during the game, looking at, after as well, trying to find stuff on the old Twitter sphere and stuff like that. So make sure you tune in to the Tuesday edition of this podcast, and I will be going over the Monday Night Football game, as well as some waiver wire options and just injuries that we'll get, a bit more news on before we get on with the rest of the week. So PFF Lilly matchup stat here. The Patriots have a league-high 16.1% screen pass rate this season. So last year, the 49ers were at that, and the Cardinals were only a team higher. So, I was looking at some of these Patriots stats because I just felt like there wasn't much explosion. They weren't that efficient. You look at them throughout the league, and they actually aren't that bad. They're usually league average, if not above average in a lot of these, different metrics. But, you guys have watched Cam Newton in this offense. They've looked so herky-jerky all year long. I think this over-reliance on the screen pass is what's kind of caused that. It's similar to kind of what we've seen in Indianapolis with Phillip Rivers this year, where, hey, this team, like, you wouldn't guess it, but the Colts have been a top 5 team in explosive pass play rate and a lot of these yards per attempt, passing efficiency metrics this year. It's not sexy. It's not Patrick Mahomes, rolling out and throwing the ball 40 yards downfield between two defenders. It's usually, a veteran quarterback and a smart coaching staff just kind of creating things to be had there. So, hey, situation where I understand this Patriots passing game looked awful in this one, but I think because of, the guys that got working on this game, and ultimately the guy under center who will have better weeks moving forward, not an offense that we can completely ignore, particularly in the passing game in week 13 and on. Next matchup, we got the Dolphins defeating the Jets 20-3. We'll try to speed this one a little bit. Ryan Fitzpatrick was back in action, won his second revenge game against the Jets this season, ended up going for 257 yards and a pair of scores. Turnover-free football, was super well and just lofted up to Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki. Got a nice touchdown to Gesicki where he mossed some poor Jets defender. Parker went for 8 catches, 119 yards on a team-high 14 targets. And yeah, that was pretty much it. Again, this was the Jets, so just like Baker Mayfield, we don't need to crown him after that performance. Same thing with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I get it, but hey, this was a big step up from what Tua has been offering. And they're talking about this thumb injury maybe keeping him out longer. I'm sure they would be playing Tua if he was healthy enough to do it. But just realize, Brian Flores was talking about when he pulled Tua out in that Broncos game, it being performance-based and not because of injury. Apparently that wasn't the case, but he said he needed to really hold him accountable. If they're really holding him accountable, Ryan Fitzpatrick has been the better quarterback in Miami the entire season. Doesn't make sense to try to ride Ryan Fitzpatrick and hopefully best case you are competitive for one, maybe 2 rounds in the playoffs. No, of course not. I think you find out what Tua is. You have the Houston Texans draft pick, and then from there, you can decide if you want to use that draft pick on a high-end quarterback next year and beyond when you're actually going to be in your competing years. But, this is the world we live in, and we will, continue to monitor it and see if we'll get the Fitz or Tua show moving forward. But yeah, as long as Fitz is here, we can honestly rely on Parker and Gesicki far more than when Tua will get back under center. Sam Darnold, 2 interceptions, 197 yards on 27 pass attempts. Kind of typical Sam Darnold game where saw a couple nice passes to Perryman and Mims that kind of make you wonder what he could be like in a post-game system. But overall, just far too many mistakes between the very few, highs mixed in between. So, going in this game, Adam Gase said, look out, you'll see what this offense really looks like with our top 3 wide receivers now. Not quite so much. So credit to Sam Darnold, though. 12.8 yard average target depth. That was the highest single game mark of his career. So, Jamison Crowder, I'm sure he wasn't happy about it. Only 5 targets, 3 catches, 31 yards. At this point, Crowder is probably droppable, I think. Look, we've now had several games with each of Perryman, Mims, and Crowder active. Went from Flacco to Darnold. I thought that we would get back to seeing the Jamison Crowder underneath wasted slot target role, but no, that's not. He's apparently willing to throw deep to Perryman and Mims. That's better for this offense, even if it didn't show up in this game. And I do think that, while Perryman and Mims, look, they're going to be erratic as well moving forward. I do think, Crowder is no longer the centerpiece of this just god-awful Jets offense. Looking at these backfields, Frank Gore, 57% snaps, 18 carries, 3 targets. I like to think that, Gase just has all these kind of like rush attempt metrics, like, oh, Frank Gore, games that Frank Gore has over 15 rushes, his team is like, 110 and 11 or something like that. And he just, kind of walks up to the team post game and is like, look, guys, I tried to give him the touches. Like, I don't even know what to tell you. We got there. This was, 1 in 11 times, won't happen again. But that's my end discussion on this. Ty Johnson, Josh Adams not involved. Just stay away from this backfield. The most empty touches you can imagine for a fantasy back in the league. Miami situation was very crowded. DeAndre Washington, 47% snaps. Matt Breida, 34%. Patrick Laird, 15%. Myles Gaskin was seemingly close to getting back this week, so expect him to be back next week and have his usual 3-down role moving forward. He's going to be a top 24 back the rest of the season. Denzel Mims apparently suffered a lower body injury. I did not see it, but that is one to keep an eye on. If he is going to be out, that would make Brashad Perryman, more of an upside wide receiver 3. Credit to Perryman. He had a couple nice catches this game. One of a few examples out there. Nelson Aguilar is another one where truly, these guys are not the same player you might remember from a couple years ago. It's okay for NFL players, particularly young ones, to get better over time. We got to give them credit when they do so. PFF The Limb matchup stat is involving Devontae Parker. So in Parker's career, he's played with quite a few quarterbacks, all under, and quite a few under Adam Gase as well. So I removed his rookie year because he had a bunch of games his rookie year just with 0 targets, and those would have kind of thrown off these splits. But so Devontae Parker's fantasy points per game per quarterback. With Ryan Fitzpatrick, 15.1 fantasy points per game. With Josh Rosen, 12.5, 10.7 with Tua, 10.7 with Jay Cutler, and then 8.1 or fewer with Ryan Tannehill, Matt Moore, and Brock Osweiler. Targets, same thing, 8.4 with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Cutler actually got him 7.8 and 6.3 from Tua. So by far the most fed and the most efficient version of Devontae Parker has been with Ryan Fitzpatrick under center throughout his entire career. And while Tua, he's not getting him up there, at least he's third in the targets right now. But again, we saw Fitzpatrick go for 39 pass attempts in this game. They won by 17. Tua couldn't clear 30 in any of his starts. So it's a different offense when they go from Fitzpatrick to Tua, and because of that, Parker is not the same high caliber fantasy asset that we've seen him be with Fitzpatrick under center more games than not. The Giants defeated the Bengals 19-17, and I would say the worst game of the day from start to finish. And, for some reason, I had this one on my big screen on 1 p.m., and it was a terrible tone to set the day, and I'm still mad just thinking about it. But Daniel Jones, he was playing well. I mean, he had some nice downfield throws to Evan Ingram, potential 74-yard score to Darius Slayton. It was maybe a hair too long, but you know what? He hit him in his hands. I mean, Slayton was behind the defense. It was a catchable pass. Slayton could not come down with it. So if he gets that 74-yard touchdown on a bomb, we're obviously having a different conversation here. So he tried to stay in. He suffered a hamstring injury, unfortunately. Tried to tough it out the next play, couldn't move. Tried to come back in the next drive, still couldn't do it. So, credit to Daniel Jones for trying to tough it out, but he will be going through this hamstring injury. So we'll see, what he comes back to. But either way, I mean, if he's going to try to play through the pain, the big thing for Daniel Jones all season long has been his rushing upside. Obviously, that's going to be, pretty much shot with his hamstring injury. So he's someone that, hey, we've talked about PFF. Maybe if not the single best quarterback in the NFC East throughout this year has been Daniel Jones. Not a high bar, I understand it, but you take away his running ability, and that's going to be a major thorn in the side for his fantasy football manager. So he is in this situation where I do not think he's someone you need to really hold on to moving forward, because I am that concerned about what he will be as a fantasy asset without his legs. His passing game, though, Evan Ingram, 6 catches, 129 yards on 9 targets, the best he's looked all year, and they were actually giving him some downfield opportunities. Imagine that, not using Evan Ingram like Jason Witten for more than, and then trying to do more than just give him, one jet sweep a game like seemingly Jason Garrett's other decision was throughout this year. Sterling Shepard, 7 catches, 64 yards and 8 targets, and Golden Tate had 9 targets, 4 catches, 36 yards. So Slayton actually got goose-egged, which I did not realize till right now. That is disappointing as hell, particularly considering that long drop. I would just note, last thing, Colt McCoy came in after Daniel Jones. Jason Garrett on a regular 2nd and 10 from the 30-yard line with 5 minutes left. I just want to make this clear. This was a neutral, normal situation. Jason Garrett called a QB sweep for Colt McCoy. Unironically. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, moving on to the Cincinnati side of the ball. Bengals took, so after the Giants scored with Wayne Gallman, the Bengals took the kickoff back for a touchdown, and then Brandon Allen led them to a field goal when they got the ball, I think, at their own 45-yard line. Until the fourth quarter, when the Giants finally got up multiple scores and you physically saw their defense shift to more of a prevent scheme and start laying off, that was the only time we saw Brandon Allen lead this offense to any sort of consistent success, and up finding T. Higgins for a touchdown. And then miraculously, the Giants, they converted for a second to get this game game-sealing first down, comes back on a penalty, they punt the ball. I think it was Alex Erickson checking. Yeah, I think it was Alex Erickson. 29-yard punt return sets him up at the 50-yard line with a chance to all he needs is 3 points. So 15 yards, and you're talking about a potential victory for Brandon Allen and company. Immediately strip sacked on the first play. So we're talking about it on the podcast throughout this week going into this one. Just how this offensive line doesn't allow really anyone to succeed. And even with Joe Burrow having that quick release time, he was even under pressure more than most quarterbacks throughout this year. You take someone like that out of the picture, and it's just going to be atrocious for everybody else involved. And the fact that, Tyler Boyd had 6 targets, Higgins had 5, Drew Sample had 5, AJ Green had 3. If Brandon Allen is 1, not going to throw all that much, and 2, not going to focus on anybody, we truly cannot trust anybody in this offense as a realistic fantasy asset here moving forward. Looking at this backfield, Giovanni Bernard led the way, 76% snap rate, 8 carries, 3 targets. Samaje Perine, 16%. Travion Williams, 11%. It moved in the right direction. I mean, Samaje Perine was actually, if you listen to our game-by-game breakdown podcast last week, Perine was taking Gio off the field on some pass-down situations, which made absolutely no sense. But, it's the Bengals, so who knows? At least with Perine being out of the picture, we can, start to think about Giovanni Bernard back in that kind of borderline RB2 range. But again, I just do not want to rank any of these wide receivers or running backs among the top 24 guys at their position as long as the play under center is this bad. On the Giants side of the ball, Wayne Gallman, 24 carries, 4 targets, 63% snap rate. Dion Lewis, not nearly as involved, 28% snaps. Alfred Morris down there at 10%. So Gallman looked good. I think he's been their best non-Saquon back the entire season. Devontae Freeman, I believe, is eligible to return next week off the injured reserve list. So if he comes back, I would see it being a little bit more of a committee. But I know Gallman is still someone that I think could be getting 15 carries per game more weeks than not. I think he's earned it at this point. The coaching staff is starting to realize that. So, not to tell him if they had 3 catches for -3 yards. It wasn't, the most spectacular performance. But, he's now found the end zone, I think, 6 times in the last 5 games. We're talking about a volume-induced RB2 here, everybody. Other notes, I mentioned the Darius Slayton 74-yard touchdown go off his hands, kick return touchdown for Bengals, and that final drive at the 50. I mean, truly, this was just watching this, it was setting up as the perfect, just hysterical loss for the Giants, and the fact the Bengals couldn't pull it off just shows you how incompetent this team is right now without Joey Burrow under center. PFF Lily matchup stats. So Evan Ingram this year is averaging a career low 60.5 PFF receiving grade, and I'm surprised his 6.8 yard average target depth is actually in line with the past few years. But we're also seeing career low marks in yards per route run at 1.4 and 4.7 yards after the catch per reception. And I just, people I think haven't realized how good in the past Evan Ingram was. Going into this year, he was averaging the 8th most receiving yards per game among any tight end ever. He was averaging 52 receiving yards per game going this season. He has cleared that mark just 3 times in 2020. That's 8 games with fewer receiving yards already in 2020. This is the first time he's had even more than 5 such games going back to his rookie year when he had 8. So we are now going to get the worst version of Evan Ingram yet in the year 2020, even though he's had his health. Incredibly disappointing. And look, it's not all on him, but some of it has to probably go on him as well. Again, mention that average target depth, but anytime you got the clapper calling the plays, I will give you the benefit of the doubt more times than not. Next game, we got the Titans defeating the Colts 45-26. Just got up on them early and never stopped. It was the Derrick Henry show. 3, not 1, not 2, 3 first half touchdowns. As Lee Corso would say back in the day on those NCAA football video games, most kids only dream of scoring 3 touchdowns in the game. This guy, he did in the first half. So great game from Derrick Henry. One of them should have been a receiving score. He had caught a swing pass from Tannehill. I mean, it shouldn't have been a receiving score. It was initially ruled a receiving score. They corrected it to a lateral. So when you see Tannehill's stat line, 221 yards and only 1 touchdown, just realize you throw in that extra, 20 plus yard score on that, things will be looking a little bit differently. It was a solid game from Tannehill. It's one of these games that we see him and Kirk Cousins have where low volume, but plenty of efficiency to go along with that. So he did run in a touchdown and was able to hit A.J. Brown for an electric 69-yard touchdown. Tannehill didn't have to do much work on that one, just hit AGB on a slant. He just ran away from everybody. It's just wild to me that A.J. Brown Last week has arguably a touchdown of the year against the Ravens, just plowing through their entire defense. This week catches it, and he can run away from everybody too. PFF's Mike Renner had a good comment about A.J. Brown, just the fact that safeties consistently are messing up their, pursuit angle against him, and that someone that big, to be A.J. Brown's size, 6'2", 228, I believe he weighs out at. I mean, you aren't supposed to move that fast, and safeties are continually caught by surprise with it, and that's why I think he is just a yak beast that we've seen throughout these years. But A.J. Brown was not done later in the game with the Colts trying to come back, an onside kick. The kick was short, and A.J. Brown on just a dead sprint scooped this thing. Kicker, tried to freaking get in his way, but come on, I don't think there's a defender in the league that can slow down A.J. Brown in the open field, let alone a kicker. So added a second score to his total. I heard some of you out there in the ESPN, CBS leagues having me getting those 6 points. You got to complain about that. A touchdown is a touchdown is a touchdown, even if it comes on some onside kick return. So hopefully you get that fixed. Corey Davis only had 3 targets, but he caught all 3 of them for 70 yards. A situation where if you look at them overall throughout this year, the targets are very similar between AJB and Corey Davis, and receptions and yards. Obviously, Brown's been scoring more touchdowns. He's a better wide receiver. But Ryan Tannehill, anyone's idea of a top 10, top 12 quarterback over the past 2 years, it makes sense you can have more than one fantasy relevant wide receiver. With the Colts, Phillip Rivers, 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. He was solid. I mean, he threw an interception. He had a sack in there. It wasn't a picture perfect performance from him, but no fumbles. I mean, they put up 26 points and were kind of keeping pace, at least for a little bit in this game in the first half. But once we saw them really have to go in the pass first mode, it just seemed like they weren't able to kind of get enough respect out of this Titans defense to kind of pick up the big plays that they would need in that situation. So hey, things look pretty when they're able to get the ball out to their running backs in the flat, find some easy completions to tight ends, and we saw some of that. I mean, Trey Burton had 42 yards and a touchdown. Naeem Hines had some big plays as well. But other than T.Y. Hilton, 50-yard catch down the field, which was nice. He had another nice touchdown on a well-run kind of stop and go from inside the 20. There just wasn't much consistent success to be had. Michael Pittman had a dud for fantasy managers, 9 targets, 2 catches, 28 yards. The 9 targets surprised me, but look, everyone, this is just reality of the Colts offense. I mean, T.Y. Hilton had 81 yards in this game. That's only the 3rd time all season a Colts wide receiver has surpassed even 75 receiving yards. So Michael Pittman, he had his nice 14-yard catch early on another unguarded crosser, but we talked about on the podcast last week, and just the whole idea behind not really trusting him as anything more than kind of wide receiver 4, low-end wide receiver 4 going into the spot was just that we haven't seen anybody in this Colts offense produce consistently. So even if Pittman is the best fantasy option for the Colts, which I do think he is, I would pick Michael Pittman to lead this team in fantasy points among their wide receivers the rest of the way. I just don't think even that is enough to consistently fire him up as a top 36 option at the position. So Michael Pittman, you see the physicalness and stuff from the rookie. I'm sure he'll have a solid enough NFL career, but right now just have not seen enough from him in terms of really doing anything other than run with the ball after getting open on some crossers to think that he warrants consistent fantasy appeal just in matchups that aren't going to really force the Colts to put their foot on the gas. And again, even in one where he really had best case game script, we just didn't see the sort of high end efficiency that we would want to take a chance on someone in this sort of run first offense. With these backfields, Derrick Henry 65% of snaps, 27 carries, had 3 targets as well. Good to see him getting more involved in the run game. Always trust the big dog as the weather gets cold. I mean, he was just a beast every single time in this one. Only had a long run of 31 yards. So look, I never like to take away players' big plays. They earn those big plays. A lesser player wouldn't have made them. It's not fair to penalize their stats for that. But, Derrick Henry usually is one of those guys where maybe you hold him in check until he busts a big one. Not really in this one. It was just one consistent gash after another, and that's why you saw the Titans just, really controlling this game and build that 35-14 halftime lead. With the Colts, only saw 2 RBs involved with Jonathan Taylor on the COVID list. Naeem Hines, 66% snaps, 10 carries, 10 targets. Jordan Wilkins, 6 carries, 4 targets. So I think the carries would have been a little more evenly distributed if this wasn't such, negative game script. Again, the Titans were up 21 points by halftime after all. But Hines, 2nd straight week he's gotten the start, and, Wilkins hasn't exactly impressed more so than Hines throughout the season as a pure rusher. So even if Hines kind of fits that scat back mold, he's perfectly capable of running up the middle, and they've proven willing to do that with him really all season long. So looked electric in space at some points. 8 catches, 66 yards. I know throughout the offseason, people didn't want to call him, the new Austin Ekeler and all that because it was too easy of a comparison. It's unfair to a talent like Austin Ekeler, but that doesn't mean Nyheim Hines isn't a solid enough ball player himself. And we've seen those touchdown celebrations he's had throughout the year and those flips and all that. Truly an athletic freak when it comes down to certain things he is able to do out there on the football field. PFF Lilly matchup stat. So, I want to give a quick shout out to Ryan Tannehill again because nobody this year has a higher rate of catchable passes thrown at least 20 yards downfield than the Titans at 62.5%. So, they've only thrown 24 of these, and that's the third lowest mark in the league. But just realize when Ryan Tannehill, when you see that ball leave your television screen, there's a better chance than just about any quarterback that will end up in the general vicinity of his wide receiver. Next matchup, we had the Vikings defeat the Panthers 28-27. This was a back and forth one. The big, kind of takeaway, not the takeaway, just the wild moment from this game was in the third quarter, the Vikings, had gone out there and they got a 10-7 halftime lead, feeling good enough about themselves. Kirk Cousins gets strip sacked. Panthers take it back for a touchdown. Next play, they get, Vikings get the ball back. They give the ball to Dalvin Cook. He runs up the middle, seemingly hurt his ankle really bad, but he came back and he's fine. Don't worry. But he fumbled the ball during the midst of this, and the Panthers brought that back for a touchdown. So 10-7 game turned to 21-10 just in the blink of an eye with two back-to-back fumbles returned for 6. So because of that, Kirk Cousins had to kind of put his foot on the gas more, ended up throwing the ball 45 times, 307 yards, and 3 touchdowns through the air. Justin Jefferson was a star. He's been a star all season, but particularly with Adam Thielen out, we expected him to do so. And team high 13 targets, caught 7 of them for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. I was more surprised with what the other guys were able to do. We knew Kyle Rudolph with Irv Smith also sideline would be having a solid game, and he did. 7 catches, 68 yards, but Chad Beebe had 7 catches for 63 yards in his score. BC Johnson had 7 catches for 74 yards. Chad Beebe, shout out, son of Don Beebe, in case you hadn't ever listened to a Vikings broadcast before, but, had that game-winning touchdown, cool little double move. I'm not hating on the guy. He's a solid enough slot receiver, and hey, if they're going to need to throw the ball, if Adam Thielen's going to miss, an extended amount of time, they'll need Beebe and Johnson to continue stepping up. But hey, don't get carried away, everybody. Justin Jefferson is the wide receiver we can trust here in Fantasyland. Do not spend any amount of fab on BC or Chad Beebe. I'm sure they'll have, fine enough games here moving forward. But there's one thing we learned in this Vikings offense, that volume is hard to come by. We're not going to see too many more, if any, games with Cousins throwing the ball 45 times in 2020. On the Panthers side of things, Teddy Bridgewater, 267 yards, touchdown, and a pick. Just was not really a great game from him. We saw some good throws. He had one of the best throws of the year, I thought, on the last drive of the game, 35 yards down the middle to Curtis Samuel with, pressure coming in his face. Also hit Robbie Anderson for the touchdown was a joke. It was like a fire blitz, and they just ended up getting defensive end matched up on Robbie. So the touchdown was like a crosser that he just ran to the end zone. But there was a deeper ball over his shoulder after a nice double move that I think showed off a little bit more of Teddy's arm strength. So had, a really nifty first down run. Again, he had flashes of excellence, but just was kind of too few far and in between. And I hope he's okay, because at the end of this game, he got them in a position to attempt a really long field goal, but he got hurt right before, and his left arm was just dangling from the socket, and he couldn't even really hold it up as he walked the sideline. So Panthers have a Week 13 bye. We'll see what's what, but certainly not a good thing from there. Now for the sad part of this, box score going over, everybody. DJ Moore, better ball, 40-yard touchdown, overthrown, and then had a 10-yarder at the end that would have iced this game. And not only did Teddy Bridgewater miss DJ Moore, he might have missed him, forced DJ Moore to contort his body in such a way that he suffered some sort of scary non-contact injury. Fingers crossed, knocking on wood, it's not an ACL or anything like that. But, for that to be potentially a thing that ends DJ Moore's season, a potential touchdown that Teddy missed him on, oh my goodness. Cannot have that. That's just, nail in the coffin for a fantasy season that wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. DJ Moore's had some very big weeks, but just one where you see these flashes, and hey, he still had 4 catches for 61 yards, but again, had that potential 40-yarder earlier, and then another 10-yarder later. Usually when they throw the ball in DJ Moore's area, he is open, and then when he gets the ball, he's making guys miss. Fingers crossed that he'll be able to get back there in Week 14 after their bye, and if not, be healthy in 2021 and beyond, because truly DJ Moore, one of the more fun guys in the league when things are clicking for him. some of these backfield information. I would just mention too, with all these, I've compiled these on a Sunday night. Not everything is official just yet. You can check out my running back backfield every Wednesday, released on PFF.com. It's even free if you're not an Edge subscriber or anything like that. And I have all the official snap rates, touches, whether or not they've been. I break down every backfield. So if it's something that was a 1 week blimp or, more of a trend, I break it down there. But for now, we're working with what we have. So Dalvin Cook, only 63% snaps, 18 carries, 4 targets, but Madison only had 2 carries, just more of a situation where Cook was sidelined and for a bit, and when they were in comeback mode, just getting more receivers and tight ends on the field than a running back. With the Panthers, a little more concerning. Mike Davis, 58% snaps, 15 carries, 4 targets. We saw Rodney Smith have 7 carries and Trenton Cannon have 3, so they only have 1 target each. It's still the Mike Davis show in terms of that, but Carolina Panthers team, they're 4-8 right now. It just doesn't seem like they're quite as willing to give Mike Davis just this massive featured role with that, probably not being what he's going to be doing. Oh, it's obviously not going to be what he's doing once Christian McCaffrey is back in the lineup. So whatever the reason is, we are now not seeing Mike Davis get the same sort of featured RB1 role. We'll take this usage any day of the week. 18 combined carries and receptions. Even though he didn't find the end zone, was still able to chip in about 79 total yards. So it wasn't the end of the day, but he's no longer has that RB1 usage we could really hang our hat on, and he's going to be more in that, RB 15 to 18 zone, I think, here moving forward. Other notes here, I mentioned those missed opportunities. DJ Moore also had the injury to DJ and Teddy. Again, hopefully they have time to get right after that Week 13 bye. PFF Lilly matchup stat. Only 2 players this year have more than 50 total forced missed tackles. Dalvin Cook at 55, Mike Davis at 54. So disappointing that, they aren't giving him the RB1 role anymore because, again, Mike Davis truly been one of the more fun running backs to watch this year. Do running backs matter? Do they not matter? I don't know. But Mike Davis is someone that I do enjoy watching matter on my television screen. Next matchup we got here, Falcons massacred the Raiders 43-6. Oh man, everybody, this one hurts because, we've been talking about Derek Carr on this podcast all season long, and I would just say that, just because Derek Carr was awful in Week 12 does not take away the nice things and the good things that he did in Weeks 1 through 11 for the better part of the season. But look, there's no way to kind of justify this performance. 1 interception, not 1, not 2, but 3 lost fumbles. Look, there were chances downfield. Henry Ruggs, Darren Waller, even Hunter Renfrow had some, passes thrown at least 20 yards downfield that I think they, if you run that play 10 times, they probably catch them, at least 5 of them. But man, this was rough. The Raiders had scored at least 30 points in 3 straight games going in. Everyone, on Twitter I saw just amidst this blowout was like, oh, the Raiders, anytime anyone starts talking about them, they turn in this performance. And I get it, but truly, it wasn't like a 1 week blimp that we were getting behind Derek Carr and company. It had been a prolonged change since Week 5, getting Henry Ruggs back in the lineup. And again, we continue to see that downfield mentality. If anything, I think this was probably, a road trip after a very emotional divisional game against the Chiefs that just went south. So nothing was really working out for them. They had, scoring chances at different points, but ultimately couldn't push the ball across the goal line when it mattered. So again, awful performance all around. I would just say, just like we're not letting one, bad pass from Baker Mayfield's day, ruin his performance. We shouldn't let one bad performance from Derek Carr ruin his season. Remember, Aaron Rodgers against the Buccaneers, like we've seen pretty much everybody other than Patrick Mahomes look human at least at one point. That was Derek Carr in a big way in this matchup. Matt Ryan didn't look very good either, though, people. 4.7 yards per attempt. We're not writing home about that game either. Like Derek Carr, though, it doesn't tell the whole story. Ultimately, Matt Ryan, 185 yards, 1 interception. He had another touchdown that was dropped by Olamide Zaccheaus. And I think, looking at this situation, if Julio Jones is going to be out, we just kind of need to expect this a little bit, lower ceiling from Matt Ryan in this passing game as a whole. This was now the 5th game that Julio was either completely out or played fewer than 50% of the offensive snaps in. And Matt Ryan has now only totaled 3 total passing touchdowns in those games. So, hey, Calvin Ridley, he can keep doing his thing. 6 catches, 50 yards, and a score on 9 targets in this one. And Hayden Hurst as well, even though he's playing through the pain, had 8 targets, 4 catches, 48 yards. That's it, though. Christian Blake, Zaccheaus, I just don't think we can quite trust these guys. And even Russell Gage, we haven't seen his role really change all that much with or without Julio, with or without Ridley. We just seen the overall offensive firepower die down, which has impacted Russell Gage in a negative manner. Looking at these backfields with the Falcons, Brian Hill, 47% snaps, 13 carries, 0 targets. Ito Smith, 38%, 12 carries, 4 targets. Far more split than we were hoping for. And by the way, I mean those of us that fired up Brian Hill at 4K on DraftKings. Stupid, Ian, stupid. We'll learn we'll watch the film and we will get better. As always on that one. Brian, look, neither running back was bad. Brian Hill has looked like their best running back really throughout the season. Just wasn't a great game for him, and they ended up finding the end zone, more through the air than they were on the ground. So Ito did get one late, but that was just kind of in the fourth quarter when they were done with Brian Hill anyway. By that point, if Gurley remains out, definitely going to need to treat these guys more as RB3s instead of RB2. That Brian Hill was in this matchup, though. Josh Jacobs, 57% snaps, 7 carries, 3 targets, and Devontae Booker, 38% snaps, 5 carries, 4 targets. This was very disappointing because last week, and I haven't checked the pass blocking snaps yet, but last week Jacobs was out there for 10 pass blocking snaps, and Booker was only out there for 1. So I thought with Jalen Richard sidelined, we'd see Josh Jacobs get, an 80% roll potentially if things went south. Not really. And I think, this is a little bit flooded because the Raiders were just, at one point they pulled Derek Carr in the fourth quarter for Nathan Peterman and the backups, and that was when Devontae Booker was in the game. But either way, we did not see Jacobs, dominate touches to the extent that we were hoping for. This was a floor game, and he's still going to be an RB1 moving forward. But again, this pass down work is the only thing keeping someone as talented as Jacobs away from that true top 5 range at the position. Injuries. So Calvin Ridley suffered an ankle injury at one point, appeared to tweak it, but returned the very next play, so it looks like he is good to go. Thank God. Love watching Calvin Ridley. And that takes us right into our PFF Daily matchup stat. So this was Ridley's 14th career game with at least 8 targets. This was his second worst fantasy performance in those games. Yeah, he scored freaking 17 fantasy points today. His worst fantasy performance ever with at least 8 targets, 14 fantasy points. He's averaging 23.2 in these instances. Absolute madness, everybody. Literally, Calvin Ridley with 8+ targets does not miss. One of the best wide receivers in fantasy. The proclamations, the offseason proclamations that 2020 Calvin Ridley would be 2019 Chris Godwin. Maybe not 100% accurate, but pretty darn close. Calvin Ridley has been a wide receiver 1. Anytime he's been active this year, continue to treat him as such moving forward. 4 more matchups, everybody. We got the Saints and Broncos next. Saints beat down the Broncos 31-3. This was a game that I was pretty excited to watch just because we were getting, Kendall Hinton, the wide receiver off the practice squad, coming up, played college QB at Wake Forest for the Broncos, but it ended up being kind of like what you would actually probably realistically think an offense would look like with Kendall Hinton. I mean, look, I had a start-sit question this morning about Hinton and just the kind of Broncos offense, and they asked my expectations, and I said nothing for Hinton, just like the rest of the Broncos offense. How could you expect anybody to do anything with a guy that has, never really played a snap of highly competitive football as a quarterback ever? The Broncos wanted to sign like their offensive quality control coach to be a quarterback over Kendall Hinton. So, hey, did I expect him to go 1 for 9 for 13 yards with 2 picks and another 2 drop picks? No, that's, was a little bit lower on the range of projected outcomes than I probably would have guessed. But man, this was brutal. And the fact they had hardly any time to prepare for it just made things that much worse. So Royce Freeman, 50 rushing yards, Melvin Gordon, 31. Just a disaster. Throw this game out for all Broncos evaluation and just realize that unfortunately Phillip Lindsay had a knee injury. So, we'll see a quarterback in there next week that can hopefully at least move the offense. And if Lindsay stays sidelined, we can get behind Melvin Gordon a little bit. He's had a featured role whenever Lindsay has been out this season. But just realize if by some grace of God, Kendall Hinton ends up back under center, we are not touching anybody in this offense, including him. But assuming we get a real life quarterback back next week, that's when we can go back to well with Noah Fant, Jerry Jeudy. With the Saints, Taysom Hill, 9 of 16 for 78 yards, no touchdowns, 1 pick. That's an average of 4.9 yards per carry, ladies and mostly gentlemen. So just really brutal from this passing game the entire way. They didn't even really try, and that's what's made the Saints offense frustrating. I mean, hey, win is a win is a win, but the fact that it wasn't really a game. It was a blowout. Taysom Hill wasn't even in there for the better part of the fourth quarter. So they were clearly able to play, winning football with him under center, but it was just like, a Tim Tebow late 2000s Florida Gators, game plan here where, he's ending up with 10 carries, 44 yards. Latavius Murray had 19 carries, 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Alvin Kamara is the one kind of losing out with all this with only 11 carries for 54 yards. Alvin Kamara did catch a pass this week, albeit for, -2 yards. So the fact that nobody other than Michael Thomas had more than a single catch in this game just shows you what this passing game is looking like. So Michael Thomas did have one nice 24-yard catch on a dart from Taysom, but just, 3 sacks from him. It's a situation where he goes back to pass. If his first read isn't open, he's pretty much taken off to run, or he's going to, kind of try to do something on the run once he breaks the pocket. So, there were more than a few instances where you saw Alvin Kamara open early in the play and just Taysom's kind of indecisiveness didn't ultimately give him the ball. So, hey, they're playing winning football, but if you really think this is going to work against a better defense down the way or just against a team that isn't playing a freaking scout team wide receiver as a quarterback, I'd be willing to bet you that will not be the case. So, hey, again, great defense. Latavius Murray, was really running all over them and everything. And Alvin Kamara will have better games ahead, and from at least an efficiency standpoint, I don't know about the volume, but hey, Taysom Hill, keep firing up in fantasy land because Sean Payton just wants to feed him all the touchdowns inside the 5-yard line. He got 2 more of them on the ground in this one. Just realize that the Saints team, while they are playing winning football, just like it was with Teddy Bridgewater last year, make no mistake about it, they are 100 times better off with Drew Brees as their full-time quarterback. Looking at these backfields real quick. We're just going to ignore the Broncos because this was such a mess. Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara split snaps at 48%. Latavius was in there a little bit more at the end, grinding away 19 carries. Kamara finished with just 11. The 2 targets were just horrendous. And that's going to take us right into our PFF Lily matchup stats. So what people need to realize about Alvin Kamara is that what makes him such a fantasy football cheat code is the receiving floor. It's not that he's this better runner than just everybody else by far. He's an incredible runner. That touchdown he had against the Packers, maybe the best touchdown of the season other than my guy, A.J. Brown. But I just mean in terms of where he goes about picking up his fantasy production. We look at 2017. I looked at all the running backs from these years and grouped their fantasy production in rushing and receiving buckets. So in 2017, among all running backs, Kamara was the RB16 in rushing production and the RB1 in receiving production. In 2018, when he went absolutely bonkers, he was the RB5 in rushing and RB4 in receiving. In 2019, he was the RB22 in rushing, RB5 in receiving. And then 2020, going into Sunday, he was the RB8 in rushing and the RB1 in receiving. Even with Taysom Hill under center, Alvin Kamara is going to give us RB1 production more weeks than not, but it's a massive difference between what he could be giving us with Taysom and what he could be giving us with Brees, which was one of the best, fantasy seasons we had honestly ever been seeing from a running back. Going into Sunday, Alvin Kamara had 155.8 PPR points from receiving. Mike Davis was in second place at 91.5. That's a difference of that's 64.3 additional PPR points than the next closest running back in terms of receiving. For those not keeping count at home, Alvin Kamara has 1 catch for -2 receiving yards in 2 games with Taysom Hill under center. I would hope that we're going to see multiple catches in the game as early as next week. Fingers crossed. I'm knocking on wood again. But either way, we are not getting that sort of usage, and that's concerning. Look, again, he's going to be, as I said, he's the RB8 in rushing production this year. It's not like he's going from RB1 to RB20 or anything like that, but it is the difference between, having someone that was competing with 2019 McCaffrey for some averaging, the most points the position had ever seen, to someone that's going to be, depending on the matchup, potentially in the top 8 versus in the top 12. So very disappointing. Kamara, we'll see him make, more out of his touches. He looked good out there. 4.9 yards per carry, was breaking tackles, looking as swaggy as ever. Just unfortunate to see not only his goal line opportunities now being, fully vultured by Taysom Hill because he's always out there on the field, but also him not get the targets that his skill set deserves as well. 49ers beat the Rams 23-20. So this was a game where, we saw the 49ers almost just get up and run away with it based on their defense alone because Jared Goff, 2 interceptions, 2 sacks, lost a fumble. Pretty just horrific game from Goff in general. And we saw them, just not have to pick it up as much through the air because they really couldn't. Robert Woods had his 80 receiving yards on 12 targets, but other than that, nobody else was able to even clear 50. Cooper Kupp was largely ghosting outside of a 33-yard catch. Tyler Higbee was trying to play through the pain, didn't really go that well, and because of that, Joe Everett really wasn't utilized to the best of his abilities either. So the run game has been, a source of pride for them throughout this year. They've wanted to be kind of run-first offense really up until recent weeks. Cam Akers had a 61-yard run, which was great. Nobody else cleared 20 yards. So the Akers play was awesome, and they kept feeding him the ball afterwards, and he found his way to the end zone. But that was the only touchdown from this offense throughout the game because they actually got a pick 6 from Nick Mullins on another time. And yeah, it was just a disaster throughout the way. Did they get a pick 6? Oh, crap. Sorry, everybody. I'm letting it down a little bit. How'd they get there a touchdown? Might have just been field goals. It is what it is. 23-20 49ers, just not quite the performance we were hoping for from the Rams. Okay, they did get a pick 6. That's right. Yeah. Okay, so Nick Mullins and this 49ers offense, we had Deebo Samuel back in action in a big way, caught 11 passes for 133 yards on 13 targets, only a long of 33. And going in this game, there was some concern like, hey, would Jalen Ramsey shadow Deebo? Would he have enough targets, with Jordan Reed there and all this? Look, when Deebo Samuel is healthy, we have seen Kyle Shanahan really for the last 2 years prioritize him, as long as George Kittle isn't there, as the number 1 piece in this passing game. And that was even, true to an extent when Emmanuel Sanders Sanders was still in the picture as well. But, the things he can do on pop passes and screens, this guy is electric with the football in his hands, and you're going to love some of the PFF Lilly stats I have for him in just a minute. But yeah, Nick Mullins, 252 yards, had an interception, took 2 sacks. But overall, he went out there, and like we've seen him do throughout the years, even if he isn't as consistent as Jimmy G, and he's not, going to have the kind of same sort of floor that I think Garoppolo usually brings to the table, we do almost see an enhanced ceiling at times because Mullins is a little bit more willing to throw downfield. Had a nice 29-yard dart to Richie James over the middle, and again, even if a lot of this offense is designed from the brilliant mind of Kyle Shanahan, Mullins, you can see why they keep him around and have thought as highly as they have over the years, even if he's not, putting up huge numbers week in and week out. Looking at these backfields, Raheem Mostert was back. Didn't play an overwhelming amount of snaps, 40%, 16 carries, 2 targets. We saw Jeff Wilson have 12 carries, 34% snaps himself. Both those guys lost a fumble, so that wasn't helping their cause. But Jerick McKinnon, only 26% snaps and 3 targets. So he took that true, pass down back role back into action. I would expect Jeff Wilson, with Raheem Mostert now being healthy for another game. We've seen the 49ers kind of ease guys back into it throughout the season, though. George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, I think Deebo Samuel himself, just guys that, were injured, came back, smaller role. The second week is when you see them really leaned on. So Raheem Mostert, my God, is he fast. Like, that was the big note I just kept writing myself, as I was watching this game. Like, when Raheem Mostert gets that ball, man, it's just 0 to 100 in a freaking hurry. So Raheem Mostert is someone that, 16 carries in this one and 2 receptions as well. We'll take 18 touches, from Kyle Shanahan's lead running back any day of the week, and he did find the end zone once on the ground. But I just think, moving forward here by the end of 2020, we can get a true blow-off Raheem Mostert performance. PFF Lilly matchup stat real quick before we get to there. Rams backfield, Malcolm Brown, this is getting so frustrating with them. 41% snaps, 3 carries, 2 targets. Darrell Henderson was at 33%, Cam Akers 26%. Henderson and Akers are pretty much splitting the early down work at this point. Brown's the one playing more snaps and getting the pass down work. And if they ever get to a situation where they're, stuck inside the 5-yard line, there's a timeout, it's probably going to be Malcolm Brown that gets the goal line attempt. Again, there's not one guy like most backfields. There's not one assigned goal line guy, and we saw Cam Akers get that opportunity in this one, but this is anyone's idea of a 3-headed backfield. It's not going anywhere, and despite Cam Akers playing well in recent weeks, we're going to need to see his true shift and usage before we can fire him up as anything more than an RB3 here in future weeks. Under our PFF Lilly matchup stat. So over the past 2 seasons, and this stat almost pains me to put out as the AJB wide receiver 1 truther that I am, but total forced missed tackles among wide receivers, as rushing, receiving, whatever, just touches and missed tackles. Deebo Samuel, number 1 at 35 forced missed tackles over the past 2 years. AJ Brown's number 2 at 31. Nobody else has more than 28. What's the wildest about this? So Deebo Samuel and AJ Brown are the number 1 and 2 raw leaders in forced missed tackles. They're also number 1 and 2 in forced missed tackles per rush. This gap's even wider because Deebo 0.34 forced missed tackles per rush. AJ Brown's at 0.33. Nobody else among 88 wide receivers with at least 50 touches has reached even 0.22. So not just AJ Brown that's been doing some freaky things out of that 2019 wide receiver class. Great to have Deebo Samuel back healthy because he truly is one of the league's more special talents with the ball in his hands. 2 more matchups to go over, everybody. We got the Chiefs taking down the Buccaneers 27-24. This was a game that looked like it could be a rout early, and it honestly really could have been if a couple more things had gone Patrick Mahomes' way, namely Mecole Hardman letting a potential 89-yard touchdown go through his hands. Wasn't, a perfect pass from Mahomes, but, kind of similar to that bomb earlier I was talking about with Darius Slayton. When it hits the receiver in both hands, they're not actively falling down afterwards. I do think it's a situation where they should be expected to come down with it. So look, Mahomes, it's like a broken record how spectacular he is at this point. 462 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, pretty much like it was just a Tyreek Hill show early on. Oh my gosh, was the Tyreek Hill show with over 200 yards in the first quarter alone. 13 catches on 15 targets, 269 yards, 3 touchdowns. It took until like the third quarter seemingly for them to give him consistent, safety help over the top on Tyreek Hill. They just could not stay in front of this dude, and that's what led to the 75-yard touchdown early, and Mahomes got back to him after and just was abusing Carlton Davis in man coverage all game long. But what got so scary from this offense was You saw after the second Tyreek Hill touchdown, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers started playing really far back, and then it was like 2 or 3 straight completions to Kelce and Sammy Watkins, just ripping off, 15, 20-yard chunks, and they weren't even able to, stop them, even once they started playing a deep pass as well. So, 27-24, it looks a little bit closer than it was, because just realized the Chiefs in the first quarter when everything was clicking truly looked like some world beaters out there. Quickly on to Travis Kelce, he picks up these chunks of yards so much, and I want to try to find a good stat for that last week. Going into this game, so since 2018, so over the past 3 seasons, the most catches of 15 plus yards. Number 1, Julio Jones with 108. That makes sense. Number 2, Travis Kelce at 96. More than DeAndre Hopkins, who's number 3. More than Mike Evans. I mean, Travis Kelce is a tight end, and he really is a tight end. He's not, a Mike Gesicki type that is called a tight end but spend all their time playing receiver. I'm taking nothing away from Travis Kelce as a blocker and his ability to be a complete tight end and all that. Just realize his receiving production, while it is being called a tight end, it's every bit as a true number 1 wide receiver in this league. He just happens to have Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill in his offense, so Mahomes is basically able to have 2 number 1 receivers on the same squad. But masterful performance from this passing game as a whole in this one. And we also saw that pre-snap motion again with Patrick Mahomes near the goal line, where he took a few steps to his left and then ran back across the formation so he could catch the snap on the run. They tried this little trick, pitch play back to Kelce, who probably could have plowed ahead for a touchdown. He tried to throw it to Mahomes. It did not work out. So we've seen some funny instances from Kelce over the years. I remember another trick play against the Giants where he just chucked the ball 50 yards downfield in the double coverage. It was an atrocious interception. So, Travis Kelce, I forget who said it on Twitter, but I think someone made the point where, if we could pick any player in the, it might have been my guy Davis Maddock, but if you could pick any player in the league to be, just a emergency quarterback, just for the comical side of things, Travis Kelce would be a pretty fun guy to pick to go under center. With these Buccaneers now, Tom Brady, 345 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, pair of interceptions, also took a sack. Looked erratic throughout the afternoon, but I will say, I thought Tony Romo brought up some good points. I know he gets a lot of crap, but I think we can all agree, out of the announcers, Tony Romo is the best, and, hey, we should respect what he has to say a little bit. Guy was, a high-level NFL quarterback for a long time. And the 2 points that he made that I thought stood out was, 1, Brady, even though he had that, 17 or 18 straight incompletions, on the deep balls, it's been more timing. It's not like I've seen people, reference him just having a noodle arm like 2015 Peyton Manning. Brady has the arm strength. He just hasn't been clicking on him. Peyton Manning couldn't freaking get the ball where his mind was telling him to go at that point of his career. You still see Brady having these fantastic kind of completions throughout the game. To Romo's point, it's just that now really in this no risk it, no biscuit offense, they're trying to make magic happen every single time. And he doesn't seem quite as used to, not having some of these more easier completions or having a run game, higher, screen game to kind of go off of. So clearly they're still, trying to figure things out. And I understand we've been saying they're trying to figure things out really for the past 13 weeks. But, just realize even though they haven't hit their sky-high ceiling, it's not like we haven't seen plenty of success out of this offense. And that was even true in this game. I mean, beautiful deep diving catch by Chris Godwin for 44 yards. He ended up with 97 yards on the day with 8 catches. Gronk went over 100 yards, 106. Mike Evans had 2 touchdowns, 50 yards. Really, Antonio Brown was the only guy disappointed with 2 catches for 11 yards. So he was actually leading the team in overall targets since he came into town. That's obviously changed a little bit after this one. I still think that all 3 of these wide receivers can be treated in that wide receiver 2 range more weeks than not, but I probably was being, a little bit too optimistic about AB's ability to seamlessly come into this offense. The targets were there, but clearly, they're looking at the efficiency with it, and AB hasn't been getting the same sort of separation, that we kind of remembered from the past. So I'm sure he's going to, improve a little bit after the bye and stuff. But I will say, going into the Week 14 matchup following their Week 13 bye, it's certainly fair to rank, Evans ahead of AB, and even Godwin probably ahead of him at this point as well. Just realize post-bye, as we said on the podcast last week, this is a situation where I think the Buccaneers are going to bounce back in a major way. I keep an eye on those Super Bowl odds because if they don't look like it right now, they get the Vikings, the Falcons, the Lions, and the Falcons going to the playoffs. Really good chance for them to start hot and go through an NFC that, I just look, the Saints, the Seahawks, okay, I'm not saying there aren't better teams, the Buccaneers, but there isn't exactly a clear juggernaut like the Chiefs. And because of that, hey, if they can make it through that NFC schedule, if you're able to get a good Super Bowl odds at plus 700 plus or something like that, now all of a sudden we're looking at a one-game situation where you can hedge if you feel like being a gardener for a day. Quickly on these backfields, so with the Chiefs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 60% snaps, 11 carries. Le'Veon Bell, 32%, 5 carries. Le'Veon ended up, getting a little bit more of the work early, and he was a little more effective with it. But look, it's still Clyde Edwards-Helaire backfield. We just saw all the touchdowns go to Tyreek Hill in this one, and only 27 points from the Chiefs, usually rare to see. Don't have to go back very far. In fact, just last week, the final last time Clyde had a multi-score game, even if he's not, living up to those expectations that a lot of us set for him, as a first-round back joining this fantasy-friendly offense, still a guy that's going to be, that top 15, top 16 range, moving forward. With the Buccaneers, so Ronald Jones was clearly the best back. He had an awesome 37-yard touchdown catch where he tiptoed on the sideline and hurled a guy, and also converted 9 carries for 66 yards. And yet, Leonard Fournette, 55% snaps, Rojo down there at 36%, and Fournette had 3 targets, 2. Rojo's only 2 targets. We've all seen Rojo try to catch the ball. I'm not going to say he's a noticeably better receiver than Fournette, but we've seen Fournette try to catch the ball too. And even though he caught all 3 of his targets this one, I believe he dropped 2 in the same game last week. So if you don't have a legit, LaShawn McCoy or Keyshawn Vaughn or someone you feel like really good about in the passing game, why not just go at Rojo full time at this point? He's clearly your best running back with the ball in his hand. And if you don't have anyone that's that much better that you feel good about being out there, pretty much Leonard Fournette, I guess, then why not just feed Rojo? So we'll see. Maybe coming out of the bye, we'll get true Rojo RB1 season moving forward. Unfortunately, he's still going to be, more of a boom or bust RB2 with this sort of usage. Injuries, I would just note that Mike Evans was limping around a little bit with an ankle, but that's been the case all year. Credit to him for playing through the pain. Our PFF matchup stat, Patrick Mahomes is now officially playing the best football of his career, at least if you work for PFF like I do, and that's how we clarify this with our PFF passing grade, 93.1 through 12 weeks. That is the highest mark of his career. Better in 2019, better in 2019 through 12 weeks. Russell Wilson throws Monday night, so I'm sure he'll beat this, but only Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson have at least 30 big-time throws. So just, one great performance after another from Mahomes all season long, and, the fact that he's just seemingly allergic to having these, below-average games makes him that much more impressive. Final matchup to go over, everybody. Packers defeated the Bears. I got a 41-25. I got up to do this podcast with about 8 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter because I wanted to try to be done before 1 a.m. I was really hoping I would check back on this and the Bears would have covered that 9-point spread, I bet. But unfortunately, I will just have to live with that one tonight. Aaron Rodgers was absolutely sensational. 211 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. I mean, I was joking on Twitter, like, why not just keep 9 guys in the block and just tell Devontae Adams to go get open, because I'm sure that Aaron Rodgers and him could figure it out and put it on him at some point. It just seems so easy for them at different times. They capped off the first drive of the game with a touchdown. They had a bomb towards the end that I saw that just he wasn't quite able to come up with. But if Devontae Adams had caught that bomb, we're talking about a true breakout game. So 6 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. That's obviously a great game, but we just become spoiled. All the Devontae Adams fantasy football managers out there. So Robert Tonyan caught a touchdown, nice 39 yards. It was like a corner post concept where they kind of faked the bootleg and he went right back the other way. Rodgers hit him in stride. That was pretty. And then Equanimeous St. Brown had some nice action too out there. So the only injury that happened was Alan Lazard. Looked like he got not knocked out, but at least got his bell rung a little bit, and might be in the concussion protocol. Something to keep in mind. He did score and he had 6 targets, and someone that I was expecting to potentially provide upside wide receiver 3 value the rest of the way, just because he has been this passing game's number 2 option. This season when he's been healthy enough to be out there. Not sure if that will be a given moving forward, unfortunately. With the Bears, Mitch Trubisky did not play that bad, at least to start. Too many mistakes, I get it. He lost a fumble, 2 picks, 3 sacks. That's all unacceptable. I just mean, to start this game, it sucked for him because the Packers go right down and score. Mitch drives them inside the 10-yard line. He hits Cole Kmet, who almost fumbled it, but if he would have held on to it, he either would have scored or been down at the 1-yard line. He drops it. And then he throws on to Allen Robinson, and Mitch put this ball exactly where it needed to be. A-Rob went up. He makes his catch 9 times out of 10. Unfortunately, this was the 10th time where he didn't come down with it, so that didn't go go his way. And then, they're not able to get going on their next drive. But then Mitch fumbles and has it go back for a score. And you watch the replay, and not one but two Packers guys were just scraping his face mask and helmet with their arms. So, again, Mitch had some okay enough moments. Too many mistakes, but we did at least see him, pump up Allen Robinson's numbers, because 8 catches, 74 yards, and 2 scores on 13 targets. That's what we're looking for, everybody. And if you checked out the PFF, live show that we do every Sunday morning, Allen Robinson was my start of the week, because it's just a good reminder. We got to start our studs, and Allen Robinson is anyone's idea of a stud. Would we want a better quarterback under center? Of course, but we've been wanting a better quarterback under center ever since Allen Robinson was back, catching passes from Christian Hackenberg and Matt McGloin at Penn State. Always been a problem, always been something that Allen Robinson has overcome. Continue to fire him up as, if you don't want to put him in your top 12, fine, but if you want to put him in your top 15, well, those are fighting words, my brother. Otherwise, David Montgomery, 11 carries, 103 yards, including a 57-yard run up the middle. Good to see him get a hole and make the most out of it. I sent out a tweet last week that was showing him as a top 5 person in the league in terms of just total force missed tackles. Unfortunately, he usually hasn't had these big chunk plays in his arsenal. It was good to see him get one of those. And he got a late game touchdown, 5 catches, 40 yards through the air as well. So Montgomery, he is the definition of a volume-based RB2. With this sort of production, he probably actually got to RB1 territory in this one. Him and Allen Robinson, I understand it doesn't feel good when you fire them up, but just realize they have the volume to give us the sort of fantasy production that we are looking for. With the snap rates, David Montgomery, 84% dominating the usage. Aaron Jones, 59%. Jamal Williams, 41%. Disappointingly split as always. We did see them actually split carries. Aaron Jones had 17, Jamal had 17, and a score actually. Just realized that Jamal's, were almost all coming towards the end of the game. No A.J. Dillon active still, so all the mop-up duty was going to Jamal Williams. Disappointing for Aaron Jones. He hasn't been finding the end zone for a while now, and this, like some people might say, was bound to happen because of his, quote-unquote unsustainable touchdown rate. Just realized Aaron Jones, still the lead running back of one of the league's single best offenses in the Green Bay Packers. Better days will be ahead to come. That's going to do it, everybody. Thank you, as always, for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, bringing you updated new shows every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Really excited for what we have on the docket this week. We'll be breaking down Monday Night Football on Tuesday. Wednesday, going to do some game-by-game breakdowns with my guy, Andrew Erickson. Thursday, having special guest Evan Silva on the podcast to go through some 10 questions I have for him. Friday, we'll be breaking down Thursday Night Football and going with some injuries into the weekend. So thank you, as always. Check me out on Twitter at iHartitz, IHARTITZ. Don't forget the Z. Things get weird if you do forget it. And that will be it for me. So thank you, as always. Take care, everybody. Until next time, I'm Ian Hartitz. Take it easy.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.